Welcome to our last session at the piazza of this year's ZJLF at the British Library. We have Ideas of India. We warmly welcome Asiya Zahoor, Arundhathi Subramaniam, Meena Kandasamy, Meghnad Desai, Mihir Sharma, Prajwal Parajuly, Namita Gokhale, and Sanjoy as the moderator of the section.
Thank you, Sharupa. What I'm going to actually do is just, because it's the last session, I'm actually going to do my thank yous in the beginning of the session rather than the end, so we can all run off the minute the session finishes. No festival can be put together without the help of a whole host of people. First and foremost, of course, the British Library, who are our partners, and I think Namita, William, me, and Sharupa, and all our colleagues think it is a wonderful thing that we've moved here, and we have so loved being at the British Library, and I hope you all approve of this particular move. Yes, we know we need more space, but how did we know that all of you are going to turn up? We didn't even know that 2 days before the festival started, given the ticket booking. So we promised to find more space. But thank you, British Library. We'd like to thank the High Commission, His Excellency, Mr. Yash Sinha, Ambassador Dinesh Patnaik, and all his colleagues, especially at the Nehru Center, Mr. Gotru, Vibha Mehendiratta. Our titles partners, Z Jaipur Literature Festival and Z Entertainment, Baroness Blackstone and Rolly Keating, and John Fawcett, and all his colleagues at the library, our wonderful technical crew who have really supported us in every venue. If nothing else, they've had to suffer every session. Hopefully they've enjoyed some of them, and it's quite hot. To Taj Hotel, where we all live, for being our partners for many years with the Jaipur Literature Festival. With the Aga Khan Foundation, who again are one of our old-time supporters. The Aga Khan Foundation's offices are actually just behind here. So thank you very much, Matt Reed, and all your colleagues. To BBC History Magazine, who we think are a perfect fit for everything that we do. Thank you. And to the APJ Surendra Group, our charity partners, Salam Balak Trust, who work for street children, and to Pratham UK, who we also support. Thank you all very much. To British Council, and most importantly, to all our speakers who've traveled from really, literally across the world, especially one who came from New Zealand, and those who haven't traveled such a distance, perhaps from Covent Garden. Thank you all for coming. And to each and every one of you who've really made this festival what it is, the buzz, the energy, the questions, the participation, it's really you that's made the festival what it is. So thank you, each one of you, for taking your weekend and time out. I hope you're going to be here when we come back. Please do come to the main festival, which happens in Jaipur in January, 23rd to the 29th of January. If you need rooms, go on to our website. We hold a whole host of rooms pretty much till the end of the festival, till the end of the year. And of course, we also have across the pond from you, JLF Boulder, Colorado in September of every year, which is again a wonderful venue, a wonderful festival, and we look forward to seeing you all. This year, this is part of the UK year, India at UK 2017 Year of Culture. We have a whole host of activities, so pick up the brochures on your way out, and we would love to see you at some of them. It's a great delight that we're doing this session. This is something that we try and do at the end of every festival, have one session where we have a whole host of different voices coming together to talk about what India means to them, perhaps, or about any of the other issues. And we've really got an incredible group of people. The way the session is going to be structured is I'm going to ask each of them to tell us about their idea of India for 5 minutes each, and then we will open it up for a discussion, and then I will open it up for questions from you all. Very briefly, the idea of India is obviously, while it sort of dates back all the way into history, in essence, it's a fairly new idea. And to me, it's an unfinished story. There's much to be done. There are many issues of nationalism. There's issues of sub-nationalism. We still have the entire vexed issue of Kashmir. Within India itself, as you all may well know, there are parts of India where the state is at war with its people. We are conflicting languages, we have hierarchies, we have a great deal of unemployment, there's a great deal of inequity. But at the same time, there's also great hope. And that hope and transformation has been brought about by really two things. About 17 years ago, as some of you may know, India passed a bill reserving 1/3 of seats in all local elections, not at the national parliamentary election, but at the local village elections. And what happened was, of course, in that first flush, every man put up his wife or his mother or his sister or lover or whatever. But when the woman actually took power, the first thing that she did was say that, I have to walk 7 kilometers or 14 kilometers to get water. So she brought water to her village. She then said, I have to give birth, and there's no a health system within the village. So she fought, and she ensured that the primary healthcare center or the PHC became functional in so many different ways. And then she wanted her child or their child to go to school. And the teacher at that point of time in this new bill had to report to the village panchayat as opposed to the state. Because in that point of time, what used to happen is they used to appeal to some minister or an MP at the state level and say, please transfer me, or, in essence, I will be on the roll, but I'll never go to the village school. So this has brought about an enormous amount of change in India. And along with that, as many of you know, we're a very young country. Young people are hungry. They're not necessarily interested in waiting. They have the same influences that all of us have, be it from television or otherwise. So if they're seeing a Nike ad in the village at some level, a subliminal level in a sense, they also want to acquire that. And there is a hunger for transformation and growth. The system, to some extent, still stymies that, as we've seen. I think there's anomalies in the way our election process works. Yes, there's corruption, but corruption really is in a sense, not necessarily the problem in itself. The problem is inequity. And until unless we solve the problem of inequity, we're not going to necessarily be able to solve the problem of corruption. So given that, I'm going to introduce each of our speakers. I'm going to ask Arundhathi Subramaniam to speak first. Arundhathi, as many of you may have heard over the last few days, is an award-winning author of over 11 books of poetry and prose. She's been described as one of the finest poets. We've taken her country after country where she's been absolutely brilliant. Her recent volume, When God is a Traveler, won several awards. And she was also the season choice of the Poetry Book Society and shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize. Thank you, Arundhathi. Over to you.
Thank you, Sanjoy, but I'm not so sure it's a good idea to begin with a poet. You want to?
Excellent idea.
Okay. All right. Since we have several who are going to be talking about various aspects of India, I thought I would just make my life simpler today, since I have 5 minutes, by talking primarily about the fact that while I've had a relationship with India that's always been fraught, like any relationship of intimacy, I've been indignant, I've been outraged, I've been enraged, and I continue to be. But I'd like to focus today on certain aspects of my cultural and spiritual inheritance, for which I'm grateful. So I've spent a lot of my time gnashing my teeth. Today, in my 5 minutes, I'm just going to talk about perhaps 4 or 5 points, strands that I feel the need to reclaim more of. There are many contradictions within the broad statements that I'm going to be making, but I still feel the need to acknowledge gratitude for these. So that's what I'd like to talk about. For me, my idea of India, one, is the license to have a lowercase identity, not to reach time and again for a capital letter identity, either in terms of my cultural or my spiritual allegiance. The right to have an identity that does not derive from a single tradition, a single scripture, a single institution. The right to be an unlicensed quester. The right to ask for personal answers to ultimate questions. This to me is an integral part of my idea of India. 2, the license to be a seeker rather than a believer. The license to see the ultimate destination not as God, but as freedom, which still makes great sense to me, this particular legacy of Eastern spiritual traditions. The ability to have, as we have, 330 million, apparently, odd gods and goddesses, to love them, to war with them, to throw a tantrum in verse and call it a prayer. This, to me, is integral to my idea of India. To enjoy those gods and goddesses, to have a divine a la carte to choose from, and when you don't find one who particularly appeals to your taste and temperament, to be able to invent one. And when you can't invent one, and if you don't want to choose from these, to be able to toss the whole lot out of the window and still continue on a journey that can be called a spiritual journey. To me, this is integral to my idea of India, and it fits in perfectly for me with my understanding of what it is to be a poet, which is about a life of question marks and commas and hyphens rather than full stops. The license to see the sacred and the secular not at war with each other, but as part of one continuum. 3, the license to dialogue, the license to disagree, the license to debate, the fact that some of the most exciting spiritual documents, whether it's the Gita or the Shiva Sutras, are based in fact on spirited conversation, on a free articulation of doubt. To see doubt not as impediment, but to see doubt as a prerequisite for the spiritual journey. To me, that is special and that is unique. To have living access, even today, to a contemplative tradition and to an ecstatic tradition. That is the license to disagree and the license to dance and to know when to do which. The ability to see interrelationships. There's a lovely old text called the Vishnu Dharmottara Purana, which talks about a man who wants to learn sculpture. And he goes off to learn sculpture, and he's told he will never understand sculpture unless he understands painting. So he trots off to learn painting. And then he's told you'll never understand painting if you don't learn a little music, and if you don't then learn a little dance. And so by the end of it, he realizes that you cannot understand one art form without, in fact, seeing its connections with all the others. To me, that's an exciting aspect still. However fragmented art forms continue to grow, that's still an exciting aspect of being Indian. To be able to see the body, the mind, and the ability to act in the outside world as tremendous resources, to see the body as an instrument of knowing, to see the mind as a tremendous implement, all of these as part of a journey of self-understanding, not to feel the need to chop oneself up into binaries, not have to choose between flesh and spirit. This to me is integral to my idea of India, this ability to see interrelationship. And finally, I think I'd say that the ability to be confused, happily confused, the ability to turn disorder into celebration, the capacity to turn chaos into exuberance, that ability to be gobsmacked and bewildered and not unhappy. Exasperating it can be, but to me that is still also gloriously and singularly and quite uniquely Indian. I think I'll end there. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arundhathi. I'm going to ask Prajwal Parajuly, who is the author of The Gurkha's Daughter and Land Where I Flee. He's also been the judge of the 2017 International Dylan Thomas Prize and lives both between here and India. and I'd love him to talk about his idea of India.
Thank you, Sanjoy. Hi, everyone. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, lovely. Hi, I am a Nepali-speaking Indian from Gangtok, Sikkim in the northeast. And like millions of other Nepali-speaking Indians, I am sick and tired of having to underscore my nationality every time I mention my ethnicity. It's a problem a lot of Indians from the northeast face, where your Indianness requires a qualification, where your Indianness isn't accepted at face value, where you have to go out of your way to prove that you're Indian. People ask me what language I speak at home. I say Nepali. The immediate assumption is that we are from Nepal. This, despite the fact that Nepali is an official Indian language. To prove our Indianness, we've attempted many things. We've tried distancing ourselves from Nepal. We've come up with new names or imbued new meanings into old terms. The Nepali-speaking Indian these days calls himself a Gokhale, just so he's not confused with a Nepali from Nepal. Part of the reason we have it so hard is the 1950 Indo-Nepal Treaty, which allows free movement and a right to settle in both the countries. This may have been the best thing to have happened to Nepal and the worst thing to have happened to the Nepali Indian. It makes us indistinguishable from the Nepalis of Nepal. If we aren't being portrayed as foreigners, we're often being portrayed as the lisping watchman or as the household help. I mean, to date, I can't remember a single Indian television show or advertisement that has an educated Nepali Indian in it. I can't. I have this very interesting point to make. When my novel, Land Where I Flee, came out, I'm not exaggerating when I say I received about 24 emails from people with a comment along the lines of, we didn't know there were wealthy Nepalis in India. We didn't know that Nepalis in India speak English. Some of you may be familiar with a series of ads that Flipkart produced recently. The first ad shows a few Mongolide women in a beauty salon, sort of taking care of non-Mongolide Indian women. And then there was another ad which has two little watchmen, sort of wearing the Nepali topi, lisping away with their accents grossly exaggerated. And, despite steering away from controversy for all my life, I mean, the minute there is something controversial, I never make a statement, which makes me a pathetic writer, I know. But when this happened, I actually put up a post on Facebook, and if it's okay, I'll read it. It's half a minute long, so don't be leaving your seats just yet. On my flight to Bagdogra today, I sat next to Shabnam, a young Nepali-speaking Indian woman from Darjeeling. So, of course, we talked about the Flipkart ad. It's an ad that breaks my heart and maddens me. It's an ad that ensures I will never order anything from Flipkart again. It's an ad that set me thinking. I speak Nepali. I am well educated. I am rich. My family is well off. My family is well educated. There are thousands and thousands of Nepali-speaking people like me in India. There are thousands and thousands of Nepali-speaking families like mine. I would love to see one depiction of a Nepali-speaking person like me in the Indian media. I'd love to see one depiction of a Nepali-speaking family like mine. Just one. Just one where we aren't doormen, guards, and cooks, which are wonderful things to be, no doubt, but not all that we are. We are so many other things. Just one depiction of these things, of these other things, of people like me. Indian media, is that too much to ask for? Thank you so much. Yeah, so that's my idea of India.
Thank you. So what was Flipkart? What was the ad for? Just saying buy from Flipkart,
Yeah,
or was
buy
it a
from
product
Flipkart.
on Flipkart?
No, it was where Mace, one-day delivery or something. Yeah, it had absolutely nothing to do with two lisping watchmen. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much, Prajwal. I'm going to turn to Meena Kandasamy and actually congratulate her. She's just had a baby. Many congratulations. Meena is a poet and a novelist. She's published 2 collections of poetry, Touch and Miss Militancy, and also the critically acclaimed novel, The Gypsy Goddess. Her second novel, When I Hit You, or The Portrait of the Writer as a Young Wife, has just been published this May. Meena.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I would like to talk about the idea of India as an idea of resisting this idea of India. So I would like to begin by talking about Dr. Ambedkar, who said that a people who are divided into thousands of castes cannot form a nation. They are not a nation in the sense of a word. And I would like to come to this also as, am I loud enough?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I also would like to come into this as a Tamil woman and the long going problem that we have to be accepted as Indian, essentially because we have been resisting Hindi, not necessarily the idea of India, but the idea of Hindi as a common language. And then the third thing I would like to talk about is being Indian and being female, because I'm proud to be an Indian woman. At the same time, I'm not proud of what's happening to Indian women. So, and when I come to this question of caste, for instance, and it is a very troubled question, because it is a very pan-Indian phenomena, which means that as people who are fighting the idea of caste, fighting the idea of caste supremacy, we have to form these alliances within the Indian subcontinent. We have to network and connect and resist this kind of oppression on an Indian level. At the same time, it is what prevents people from coming together as Indian, because on the one hand, you are a people who share so much. On the other hand, there are things that divide you, things that do not allow people to marry together, do not allow people to dine together, that do not allow people to just be loving neighbors or be loving, form a sense of community. And the phenomenon of caste is also a phenomena which, especially in the south, especially in Tamil Nadu, because I have seen it, is a form of geographical and spatial separation. So every village, there is a village where the caste Hindus live, and there is a village outside the main village where the Dalit people live. So every village you have two Indias in that sense, the touchable India and the untouchable India. And I think this kind of separation is what tears us apart as a people, and fighting against it is where I think we will forge a common identity through the fact of struggle. And as much as I want to also be brief, the second question is this question of Tamil identity, because there are many identities. There's a Kashmiri here, there are people, there's Prajwal who spoke about the Northeast, and Tamil has had a vexed identity with India, because India has been conflated by certain powers as representing a monoculture, a mono-language, and especially for official or administrative purposes, this imposition of Hindi has turned into some kind of vicious nightmare, because even now, even 60 years, 70 years after independence, Tamil people have to fight for saying, oh, don't put Hindi on the national highways. Tamil people can't understand it if you just totally replace Hindi, Tamil from the highway stones and put Hindi. So this kind of in 1965 we had huge riots about this this issue. The army had to be called in. So language is a very sensitive issue, and it also, I think a few months ago, a BJP minister actually, when questioned or confronted about the question of racism of Indians vis-a-vis African people, he actually went on television and said, oh, we are not racist, we live with black people, the South Indians. So, on the one hand, we are laying a claim to India, we are laying a claim to a broader identity, at the same time understanding that possibly it is not a mutual feeling, it's not a feeling of, oh, you are Tamils, but you're, as Indian as me. And I think one of the most important episodes that has shaped every Tamil has been what happened in 2009, because there was a huge genocidal war going on in Sri Lanka. More than 140,000 Tamil people are still unaccounted for, more than 8 years after the war. And we were on the streets protesting, asking our government to intervene, to stop the war, to do what India can. And we felt this helplessness about foreign policy. And I think this is a question of, what do you as a Tamil, what do you as a citizen have a stake in your country? Can you allow your country's, can you ask if country's foreign policy to, to be heard, for you to be heard? And I think it was a moment of desperation, because we had over 50, 60 self-immolations taking place in 2009 from ordinary Tamil citizens. And I think these two questions, the question of caste, the question of, linguistic nationalism, or the question of, anti-uni monoculture, is a question that we face every day. And finally, I would like to, a last minute or so, I would like to just talk about being in women, because we have levels of, a sex ratio that closely resembles a gender side, because you have only 9 women for 10 men. And I think when you're faced with this every day, then there is a question of, what does it mean to be an Indian woman? Because you've clearly survived, you've the first round of not being killed. But what do we have to do with it? Because today, if you talk about being Indian, the whole idea is that everybody remembers what happened in Delhi. People are remembering the most graphic instances of violence and immediately associating it with you. On the one hand, it's great because, women's issue have to be talked about. But on the other hand, we are pushed into this box of being, women who are just victims of abuse, or, into this little princess who needs saving box, like, oh, Indian woman, you don't have to say anything more, like we can already form the picture in our minds. And I think that allows us to not be equals on many platforms either, like, because I'm speaking from London, I have to say this. So I think all of these questions are questions of what is India to me.
Thank you very much, Meena, for sharing that with us. Many of you over the weekend have already heard Mihir speak. He is an economist and a political scientist. He's the author of Restart, The Last Chance for the Indian Economy, which was shortlisted for the Financial Times McKinsey Best Business Book of the Year. As you all know, he's won a number of awards for financial journalism. He writes a column for Bloomberg, and he's the head of the Economic and Growth Center at the ORF, which is the Observer Researcher Foundation. It's a think tank in India. Mihir.
Thank you. One of the things that you always get told about India is that we have, this great history of tolerance, tradition of diversity, of acceptance, that we have a composite culture, we experience of coexistence, that we live together amazingly. I'm sure part of that is true. We do have a composite culture. We have managed to, by and large, not kill all of each other off yet. But the way that I actually tend to look at this is, and sadly so, increasingly so over the past decade or so, is not necessarily as tolerance per se, or as coexistence, etc., but as a desire for separation. The fundamental way in which India organizes itself is into silos. All right, whether through caste, whether through language, whether through gender, whether through education, whether through class. The first question and the first way in which we evaluate other people is to put them into a particular box. And that's very important for not only our question of who we are, but our question of who other Indians are, and for our notion of India altogether. India has managed to run this long as a civilization, as a republic, precisely because not too many people choose to question this notion that we should be in silos, that we have identities that we should not and cannot break out of. And this is fundamental to actually ensuring that we are a working society, a working economy, and a working polity. And it's sort of tragic. It is true that we haven't had the kind of extraordinary traumatic event that many other countries have gone through. We haven't had the kind of famines and the cultural revolution that China had. All right? And that builds a sense of national solidarity. Whenever I come to England and I think about how this country has managed to develop a welfare state, I'm always reminded about the fact that it emerged from after a devastating war. We haven't had that kind of war. Even our colonial experience, regardless of what Shashi may be saying in another place right now, was something that most of us, in fact, participated in willingly. All right? We were all, to one extent or another, complicit. Even the ones who were supposed revolutionaries were in some way complicit in the colonial system that had been set up. So we believed in creating these separations between us. We believed in being part of these identities that were jostling, and we never believed in a uniform identity, whether for good or for bad. Separation is very important. And I don't believe necessarily that it is in the interstices, that it is in the borders between these silos that you find the real India. I would love for that to be true. That is the best and most fascinating part about India. But the tragedy is that the real India, in my opinion, is in the people who do not wish to believe that those borders exist, that those interstices exist, and that fuzziness between particular identities exists. That is, unfortunately, the real India. For example, we hear a lot about how we've welcomed through history, we've survived invaders, for example. All right, how did we survive waves of invasions? Essentially by ensuring that each time somebody came in, they were separated and put apart, and another different class. All right, how we welcomed in Parsis, we welcomed in Jews. All through our history, we welcomed in religions from all across the world, as long as they kept to themselves, married each other. We didn't want any part of them. They shouldn't want any part of us. All right, successive we's in this case. So again, it comes to being separated, it comes to creating these silos, and I very much fear that the idea of India, whether for good or for bad, is one of disunity. If on the one hand, this is good, because if you try to impose unity, there will be trouble. But on the other hand, I wish we start thinking about the fact that melding between those identities in some ways creates a far more dynamic society, and it creates more dynamic people. For many of us, this fault line between identities runs within us. But, you hear this all the time. You're one person at home, you're one person in your village, you're one person when you're traveling in London and putting something on Facebook. These are different people. Most of us do not necessarily create that integrity even within us because of the way that you're trained as an Indian to keep your identities separate. So, I'd love, every time you hear that India is a tolerant, accepting, unity and diversity, all these lovely phrases, please look at the other side of that. And the other side of that is that the diversity exists, but we haven't really gotten very good at the unity part of it yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mihir. I'm going to turn to the person who's been our wonderful venue manager, Asiya Zahoor. Thank you very much for the last 2 days. Wonderful. Asiya teaches literature at the Baramulla College in Kashmir, and she's a poet, she's a linguist, she's a filmmaker and an academic. She studied psycholinguistics at Oxford University and Caribbean diasporic literature at the University of Kashmir, please note. She is also currently a visiting scholar at the University of Westminster for a research investigation representation of Kashmir in literature and cinema. She's authored a number of books, made films, written articles and poems on issues like politics of place, diaspora, the literature of exile, the Muslim identity, the psychology of language learning. She also curates a website, bolbosh.net, to help document languages and literature of Kashmir. Asiya wanted to show a film which spoke for itself in some way, but this venue doesn't quite allow for that. And I wanted you all to hear her voice rather than just see a film. So, Asiya.
Thank you very much, Sanjoy, for this lovely introduction.
Can you hear her?
Your scarf is covering. Yeah.
I think I'm covering her.
No,
Am I audible? So, as thank you very much, Sanjoy, for this lovely and embarrassing introduction. So, to begin with, I would say that, as Sanjoy already said, that, with being a Kashmiri and being a Muslim, the Kashmiri nationalism or sub-nationalism, or as you may say, or a parallel nationalism has been going on, parallel to the Indian nationalism, and therefore there has been a very tense relationship with India, as you all know, for predictable reasons. and it's been going on for long now. And the desire for Kashmir, for its sovereignty, you may take it back to 1989 when the armed insurgency began, or you may take it to 1947 when there was a promise of plebiscite, or you may even take it further, like in 1846 when Kashmir was sold by the British to Gulab Singh for 75 lakh rupees, few goats and pashmina shawls, and Kashmir was sold along with its people, which is like the most humiliating thing. And then some scholars might go further, and then they might say that, well, it's Akbar who annexed Kashmir, and it is since then Kashmir has been fighting for its independence or its sovereignty. And if you through Habba Khatun, who is one of the 16th century poetess, very famous, through her poetry we come to know how her husband Yusuf Shah Chak, who was a very popular king in Kashmir at that time, was captivated by Babur by deceit, and then he was killed and buried he was jailed, and then he was also buried in Bihar, and his grave is still in Bihar. So there's a long legacy of conflict, of fractured identities, which every Kashmiri gets in legacy. So I'll rather, and so much has been said about this, and there have been so many debates. There's an argument and there is a counter argument to everything, and nothing has happened. Like from the last 3 odd decades, we have been having so many so much of bloodshed and violence, but nothing has come out. So rather than giving any further discussion on that, I would want to read a poem, if you would allow me. Yeah, so it is about the legacy of this conflict, about this fractured identity and relation vis-a-vis the nations that claim us. So it's called Gifts for My Daughter. I gift you hundreds of years of confusion in my genes, in those muffled chromosomes, and double X for excavating epiphanies. I sowed doubt in my womb, watered with uncertainties. I couldn't make sense. That's the job for you now, my daughter. I gift you my unsettled struggles, unread and half-read books, unattempted sins, and unnoticed virtues. A 3x2-inch laminated paper in the name of identity. A yet-to-be baptized map to be carved from the cracks between divorced nations. I gift you my unyielding obsessions, unexplored passions, a horoscope of cusps, and finally, Hamlet's unfinished line to the valley, to be or not to be. Rest is silence.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Asiya. I'm going to turn to Namita. I'm going to stop my man-woman. I'll end with Meghnad. Namita, as you all know, is the festival director of the Jaipur Literature Festival. She's a writer, she's a publisher, she's written a zillion books, including her latest book, which is beautiful. And I don't know whether we did a session of Things to Leave Behind, which was...
Not my books.
Oh, that's sad. So those of you who haven't picked up a book of hers, please do Things to Leave Behind. I met Namita, I think, 25 years ago when I was asked to do an adaptation, create a play of one of her books, God's Graves and Grandmother, which then became a musical, and it was a wonderful occasion to visit her books and her work. And of course, I'm a great fan of hers. Namita.
Thank you. Thank all of you for being here and for listening to the many ideas of India. And I'm sure you've already begun to suspect that between all these many ideas of India, there may not be a single idea of India, but there is a glimmer of an idea somewhere. All the discordancies that so many of us talked about, Prajwal about Nepali, her about the Kashmiri poems, her about Tamil, actually reflect, and his views on the silos Indians live in reflect on what India means to me. For me, the idea of India resides in her sahitya, that is, in her words. her poetry, her songs, the oldest, richest, and most diverse traditions of oral and textual literature in the world. India lives in her languages, 24 official languages, including English, 6 classical languages, Tamil, Sanskrit, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, and Odia. A few figures to provide a sense of the vast linguistic landscape. 122 spoken languages, 1,635 classified mother tongues, another 1,957 which are pending classification, which I've understood, but it is too complicated to explain to you right now why they are all pending classification. Thousands of dialects, 14 major scripts connected to the Unicode system in today's world. Magazines and newspapers published in 101 languages, radio programs in 146 speech varieties. There were 234 million Indian language internet users in 2016. I'm going to stagger you some more with figures as we go along, but this is to give you a sense of what is this nation and this culture we all inhabit. India lives in the past and the present, in her epics and her folklore, in the Mahabharata of over 100,000 verses, in the living text of the Ramayana, constantly reinterpreted, many versions, many recensions, in the body of myth that is constantly challenged, fought with, reinterpreted, recreated, retold. India lives in ideas and arguments and still and forever the free expression of thought. Ideas of India under challenge. Homogenization of thought is a threat everywhere. But I think, I know, I feel that the creativity of our culture, of this vast palimpsest, cannot be easily challenged or devalued. Most Indians are bilingual, many trilingual. This natural multilinguality is the source and the inspiration for cultural pluralism and a natural acceptance of diversity. The great writing in India is happening in the Indian languages, in Hindi, Bangla, Odia, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, so many writers here, in fact. Kannada, so many others. It expresses itself through transformational Dalit literature, through speculative fiction, through meditative inspirations, and dystopian dreams. Who's the dystopian dream person here?
Mihir is closest to
Each of the Indian languages and literatures has rich historical aesthetic traditions. They are rooted in their physical and cultural geography. The writing that is emerging is dynamic and contemporary, full of anger, full of questioning, also carrying a continuity of thought and identity. The Jaipur Literature Festival, the Z Jaipur Literature Festival, of which this is our 4th edition, provides a platform for this complex literary culture and this spontaneous and accepting multilingualism. English too, and this will surprise you, of course you know English is an Indian language, but we are the world's 2nd largest English-speaking country. It is estimated that 10% of India's population, or 125 million people, speak English, a figure that is second only to the US and due to quadruple in the next decade or two. Indeed, India exists in a constant ongoing state of translation and the excitement of books, ideas, and dialogue, and in nurturing a growth in the publishing and the content industry, in mainstream hybrid media, books, films, our songs, our poetry, which encompass the Desai and the Magi, the classical and the folk forms. These are what hold these many ideas of India together. An ancient Vedic hymn commanded that we pray to the gods in many languages. Do we have many languages in one literature, or many literatures, and do we have many languages in one literature, or many languages and many literatures? This too is an ongoing argument. There can never be any one India or idea of India. As a great writer, U.R. Ananthamurthy said, I cannot live in only one language. I live in English, I live in Kannada, I live in Sanskrit, and in so many translations. And he continued, if you look for the diversity of Indian literature, you come to see its unity. If you seek the unity, you are struck by the diversity. So, Jai Hind, thank you for my idea of India.
Thank you very much, Namita. We should put some of these figures up actually online. They're quite fascinating. moving on to Lord Meghnad Desai, who many of you are familiar with. Lord Desai has been in the House of Lords for over 25 years, if not more, 1991. He's written a number of books. He's a contributing columnist to a number of newspapers as well. And he is also an emeritus professor at the London School of Economics.
Okay, the first question is, why do we need an idea of India at all? And I think it arises from a certain inferiority complex or a certain insecurity. Because the British said, you're not a country. You know, Churchill said that India is no more a country than the equator is. And so the nationalist movement was stung into action. We have to be one country, no matter what. We didn't say, okay, get lost, you know. Europe is not a single country, and we are as large as Europe. So why are we complaining? But no, we soldiered on to invent an idea of India, a single idea of India. And if you, the classic text, of course, is Nehru's the Discovery of India. Okay, Nehru had to discover India for himself, sitting in a prison on the eve of his becoming prime minister. He knew he was going to be prime minister. I can't go into those anecdotes. Anyway, so and then the India he had discovered got partitioned. So what was the India he was prime minister of? So he had to invent another idea of India which would work. Because the one big fear you find in the literature at that time is what's called Balkanization. India would be Balkanized. India would be split up. India would break up. Constant worry. And so an idea, of course, Congress having more or less lied and said they never accepted the two-nation theory, which they did, so they had to invent a new India. And so Nehru invented a secular, democratic, liberal India. Very fine idea. It worked for about 50 years, very nicely. Sunil Kalnani wrote a bestseller book on it, and I'm still jealous of him for that. Now there is a struggle of the alternate single idea of India. The monism dominates in a country which boasts about diversity and plurality and 230 million. I thought it was 330 million, but we will, you know, gods and so on. Monism, because the Christians said you have to have one God, one book, and one country. So then, right now, the Hindu nationalists of all people want a single country. They want a single God. They even Semitize the thing. They want a single God. And they want a single country, and, you know, they're searching for a single book, but the Rig Veda is so large, and if anybody has read it, it's so utterly boring that you can't make it a book. So Bhagavad Gita will do, you know, because it is short enough to be able to understand it. Anyway, so I have since about I was, I think, 18 or so, always believed that India is a nation of many nations. So the whole idea of nation sometimes is connected with language, sometimes with religion, sometimes with territory. Bangladesh is a proof that religion doesn't define a nation. You need language as well. The Bengali-speaking Muslim could not agree with the Urdu-speaking Muslim, so Pakistan broke up. So we have to regard each language as a nation, the Tamil nation, you know. And so India has many nations. And the miracle is that Balkanization did not take place. Although India is only 70 years old, in the 20th century, many countries did not last 70 years. Yugoslavia is one, and the Soviet Union is another. Russia was only barely two years above 70 and kind of broke up. So lasting 70 is a fantastic achievement. And why we have done that, and stop me when I go over my time, I think we have done because of the amazing revolutionary step by the founding fathers and mothers, universal adult franchise. We have to use democracy and a system by which You only work your way through the voting bank, the vote bank. And if you want to establish social equality or equality of status, you go through the ballot box. If you want to have your language group come up, go on a strike, go on a march, elect your government and do it that way. And that is the way India has survived 70 years, in a totally chaotic way. And along the way, new generations are having the confidence that we don't have to worry about being one. We are many. And let's be comfortable. We are actually inventing the notion of being a multiple India, as you have seen this evening. Until the oldest person talks, nobody's even talked about 1947. But that idea is still there, and in the political system, it's still being fought out. The Hindu nationalists will say the secularists. But when the people grow up, when they acquire confidence, when they go around the world and see, nobody is in a much better situation than India, culturally or socially, politically. We will acquire the confidence. India is a nation of many nations, and as long as it is a democratic country, it will continue to be a single nation of many nations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meghnad. I'm actually conscious of the time. I mean, there are hundreds of questions that I would have loved to pose. One on the economics of the future of this one India, on subnationalism, on language. But perhaps it's best to go across to the audience and ask if any of you would like to ask them a question. If you're going to make a comment about your idea of India, I would really appeal to you to make it really short and crisp.
No, Sid, don't do it.
And otherwise, I will jump in and say thank you so much. So, questions? Just wait for the mic, otherwise we're not going to be able to hear you.
Who's got a mic?
How can India unite the whole world? This is the question.
How can India unite the whole world? So I'll hold that question. Any other questions here? And did you want to ask one? No. Yeah, no.
Hi, my question's more from an economic point of view. As India looks outwards and looks at growth and development, maybe for you, having foreign companies come into India, actually, just from a supply chain sourcing point of view, is hugely complex, because there isn't universality in terms of sourcing from one to the other, to different states, the different policies, the different regulations. So actually, on an institutional level, on an operational level, a sense of one India, because the cultural and the diversity and all of that is a beautiful thing. But from a very practical opening up, from a business point of view, how do we present a one India and get rid of the complexities of
Fine. So how do we? What was the question? How do we make? How do we unite the world? The complexities of business.
Mrs. Thatcher once defined UK's
Just hold it closer to you, please.
UK's ethos as Judeo-Greco civilization, and Nehru relies in discovery of India on the civilizational idea of India. Is that still quite tenable in a contemporary setting?
Okay. Any one more question, and I'll go straight to the panel. Anybody else? Right behind you.
This is to Lord Desai. You said it is democracy and elections which keeps India going. But instead, wouldn't you also think that it's the bureaucracy left behind by the British which actually keeps it going? And I mean, this is a very crude way of putting it, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Thank you. So anybody wants to start with? How can India unite the world? Does anybody want to take on that?
By leaving it alone.
So, in one sentence, by leaving it alone. So I think we've seen how Trump is trying to unite the world, but perhaps by leaving it alone would be the best for that. Mihir, do you want to answer?
Yes, so this is actually, thanks for asking that. And in many ways, it's sort of the operational, it's the flip side of all that we've been talking about. When Nehru invented, well, not Nehru, but when Nehru was forced into thinking about the notion of the linguistic state and the notion of India as a union of states, I don't think he quite predicted how it would work out operationally. And one of those things is that now we have states that have multiple different ways, multiple different licensing authorities, different ways. You know, if you're a farmer in the state of Karnataka, you cannot automatically sell your produce just 20 miles across the border in another state. We are far less united as an economy, forget about the United States, than Europe has been for 40 years. All right, forget about China. We are within ourselves, we are not a single market. In fact, last week we took a giant step towards becoming more of a single market by trying to incorporate a lot of state taxes together, state indirect taxes together into one national system. But there are many, many things still to be done. And the truth is that this links up into what the other lady asked about the bureaucracy. And India has been held back by the fact that it has not changed the state that the British left. Yeah. The British came into India, looked at this very large country, looked at each other, said there are 30 of us, how can we rule 50 million people? Decided that they would set up a very, very simple extractive state, something that exists only to prevent riots and to collect taxes. And then when freedom comes along, we do not change that state at all. We introduce democracy, we introduce linguistic states, but all we have is this tiny, tiny extractive state that is supposed to then administer this vast and complex economy. And these guys have now developed interest groups of their own. Even when you're trying to create a single tax system, you cannot in any way offend all the hundreds of thousands of tax officers that are employed by all the individual little states. So, although you have one tax system, you are allowing those individual tax officers in each state the ability to then define rules that apply to a single state on top of that one thing. So, once again, you're back in the situation where you will have multiple little bureaucracies. Even today, you can probably, there's a story that French companies tell about selling, that produces in Madras and trying to sell in Bombay. They export to Bombay from Madras via Amsterdam, because it's easier to do that, to put something on a ship that goes to Amsterdam and then comes back into, to Bombay, than to travel across country, deal with the bribery, deal with the bad highways, deal with the borders. So we're a long, long way from being anything close to the kind of single market that delivers prosperity.
Can I also, you made an off sort of statement. You said all this cultural diversity is fine, but what about the practicalities of it? Today, unless you understand the culture, the linguist, and the, every 100 kilometers in India, everything changes. And, I remember Richard Verma, the former ambassador, once asked me to come and speak to a group of business people, and they said, what are we doing wrong? We tend not to be able to do business, blah, blah, blah. And I said, because you all come, do a handshake, think that you've got a deal, and you walk away. In India, if you have to do business, you have to come, you have to, speak, have a conversation, go out for a drink, go back, come back the next month, go for the grandmother's, whatever, 70th birthday, give her a gift, go back, come back for the next big wedding. After that, if you think you've integrated into the family unit, however corporatized the system is, only then, once you've understood the culture, should you actually be doing business. Otherwise, you'll be paddling upstream, certainly without any kind of rescue whatsoever. So cultural understanding is key to anything that is in India. And unfortunately, in most countries across the world, cultures always seem to be this basket case where you have to write a check or donate and stuff, not realizing how much it actually contributes to business, to understanding, to creating a safety net, to contributing to local economies, to creating jobs, and I can carry on forever on that one. But going on to the question about bureaucracies, would any of you like to take that?
So, no, I think it is. I would agree. You see, the British themselves have reformed their bureaucracy, right? At least 3 times in the 50 odd years I've lived here. and it made much more performance-oriented. The salaries are determined by performance and so on. There are independent organizations which have to sign an agreement with the government, performance targets and so on. Now, India, partly because it was born in a partition and violence, decided, despite what Nehru had said about abolishing the ICS and all that, decided that continuity with the colonial structure was the safest option. So India didn't actually become independent, it just continued as it was before. And then added to it Fabian socialism, which was the flavor of the month in the late 1940s Britain. And that gave immense importance to government, and not so much ministers as to civil servants. Now, that system has not changed at all. And all Indian political parties believe in a mishmash, what I call a khichdi of economic philosophy. With the state is very important, business is not bad, but nobody says a positive word about business. They'll take money from them. And so they're neither market-oriented nor state-oriented. They're not liberal, they're not. And so it somehow works through corruption. Now, if Narendra Modi stops corruption, good luck to him. But God, if there is one, help us. Because the system doesn't know how to work without corruption. And so I think, in a sense, of course it has worked because what is called jugaad. The Indian businessman finds a way around any regulations. Like when they demonetized, they found a way of not submitting their ill-gotten gains and converted that into something else. So, yes, it is a difficult system. And given the resources the country has and the talent has, it has disappointed immensely in terms of growth. South Korea's income was a fraction of India's income in 1950. It is something like 25 times now. Why? Because South Koreans came to India, looked at it and said, this is one thing we're not going to do. So anyway, I could go on, I will not. But I think bureaucracy is a problem, and many of us have written essays saying how they should cross-mix private sector people and public sector people. There ought to be holidays, there ought to be much more innovation. But, politics is very
I'm going to add to what you said, Meghnad. Some years ago in this last, this thing when there was a planning commission, I remember we had a meeting where some of the district collectors had come and there was a whole review of why they don't deliver. And this one particular district collector from Gorakhpur, I think he said, sir, we have 1,026 schemes to deliver. And I think his total budget in that district was, 637 or 47 crores or whatever. He said, I have two IAS grade officers. So between the three of us, in a year, if we're able to actually deliver 26 schemes, and when he said deliver, he said, the only thing that we can do is really tender, put it out, and of course, the minute we put it out, because it's 26 schemes out of 1,000, whatever, everything else comes into play because we have no way to actually assess who's going to deliver the best. And in India, in the bureaucracy, the only way to say that you've succeeded is that you're supposed to spend all your money. If you spend your money, you're seen to be very efficient. If you have saved money, you're inefficient because you haven't done enough work. And if you've overspent, you're a bad puppy. So there's nothing about qualitatively how you've delivered. The bureaucracy is and will continue to be one of the biggest challenges that India has to offer. And please remember, at the end of the day, people who join the bureaucracy are from society. It is reflective. So the minute you say we're going to do away with corruption on, overnight, society tends to be corrupt when there is inequity. So until and unless you're able to focus specifically on the issue of inequity through education and development, this change is not going to happen even in 2019 or 2020 4 as the present Prime Minister wishes it to be. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to close. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you all very much, our wonderful speakers, all our volunteers, our partners. Thank you to each one of you, and really but for making this such a brilliant and wonderful first year here at the British Library. We look forward to seeing you. If you want to receive information from us, you can either go onto our website and register there on the sides, or just email us. Look forward to seeing you at one of our UK India at UK 2017 events, and have a wonderful summer. At least it seems to have begun today. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Aga Khan Foundation, BBC History, British Council, and Z.